Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the ATP Equity Committee, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone who's taken time out of their busy schedule to join us with our accessibility webinar. Just want to give a quick overview of today's panel. We have three lovely panelists who volunteered their time to be with us today and share their experiences and expertise as professionals in the testing industry, who I'll be introducing in a moment. We'll have approximately 30 minutes of questions with our panelists, and then I'll open the floor up to questions from the audience, as well as those that were submitted ahead of time for this webinar. Just a couple housekeeping notes. Please keep your microphone muted throughout today's session. We do have an audience Q&A at the end, and I'll remind you when we get to the audience Q&A, but keep yourself muted and then use the raise hand feature during the audience Q&A if you do have a question, and we'll get to you as time permits. So joining us today are three experts in the assessment industry who will share their practical insights, real-world experiences, and strategies for supporting accessibility efforts. Before we begin, I'd like to give a brief introduction for each of our panelists. So we have Allison Vignola, who's a content accessibility lead within ACT's Measurement Research and Development Division. Working from her home in Maine, Allison guides ACT's accessible content strategy and collaborates with partners across product, research, and operations to advance equitable assessments for all test takers. As an active advocate for people with disabilities for nearly 30 years, Allison brings hands-on experience translating accessibility standards into practical workflows to improve the test taker experience and enable better outcomes. Joining us today, we also have Dr. Cynthia Partial, who's the principal consultant with Touchstone Consulting, where she focuses on the design of innovative assessment formats, including alternative item types, or AITs, the use of virtual reality, and simulation-based tests, SBTs. Dr. Partial has helped numerous testing organizations with user-oriented research tools, such as focus group facilitation, Think Aloud usability sessions, interview protocols, and survey designs. She has a passion for good usability and effective communication, and she's worked and presented on accessibility approaches, especially for innovative assessments. Finally, we have Matt Robinson, who has more than 25 years of experience in assessments, disability, and accessibility. Before joining Pearson VUE, now Pearson Professional Assessments, Matt worked as a school psychologist in K-12 education for over 13 years, specializing in clinical assessment and leveraging technology to help students remain in their homeschool environments. Matt joined Pearson VUE in 2013, initially supporting the accommodations team, and later transitioned to the Accessibility for Assessments team in 2018. Today, Matt leads the Pearson Professional Assessments Accessibility Services team, a group of experts dedicated to guiding the organization and consulting with clients to ensure that the accessibility needs of all test takers are met. He holds a master's and specialist degrees in education and is a certified professional in accessibility core competencies, CPACC. And then I will be moderating today's session. My name is Dr. Laura Johnson, and I'm a senior R&D analyst at Sigma Assessment Systems. So let's kick off with our first question. What approaches have helped you engage stakeholders and move accessibility efforts forward? So as each panelist responds, they'll talk a little bit about themselves, and then a little bit about the question as well. So Allison, kick us off.
All right, thanks, Laura. Yeah, as Laura said, I'm here in Maine, so working from my home, so I may have a dog snoring behind me, and we have a couple feet of snow outside, and it's causing all kinds of things with internet and cell towers and things. So if I go out, that's why I might end up turning my camera off. But I am really excited to be here today to talk about accessibility in the context of assessment. Accessibility is a conversation that certainly evolved over my time in this space, though the foundations of it are still very much the same, and we're still saying the same things. My professional experience has been in the K-12 space at the state and local levels, the teacher, administrator, and now, of course, the assessment industry. But most salient to me has been my journey as a parent of a child with disabilities. And I think it's really important to share that context with you because I'm rooted solidly in the model of social model of disability and that I want people to understand that people like my child are capable and they can be active participants in shaping solutions, that they have a right to equitable opportunities, and that by including people with disabilities in every aspect of our society, that same disability that the medical model might have looked to cure or solve for can instead bring us rich resources and fuel innovation. So coming from that perspective, my focus has been on removing barriers, or better yet, actually setting up systems that look for barriers before they exist for our customers. So changing attitudes and then prioritizing inclusive practices. And this really speaks to the question about how I engage stakeholders, because framing accessibility not as a compliance burden, but as an innovation driver and a path to broader impact has really been important to my work. And so we think about, like, who are the stakeholders we're talking about here? Are we talking about company leaders? Well, from a market perspective, accessibility isn't about serving a smaller group. It's about accurately reaching the market that we already have, right? So more than 1 in 4 US adults have some type of disability, according to CDC. So we're talking about 70 million adults in the United States. That's not a niche concern to address, right? It's a core market factor. So, because disability cuts across every segment, affects every household and institutional purchasing, it directly shapes who can participate in our society. So another big stakeholder that I'm directly working with are our test developers, right? Our content specialists who are writing items. And we know that the solutions that are developed for individuals with specific needs can often lead to improvements that benefit all users. So I like to frame it in the fact that, tools that many people use every day, from the electric toothbrush to the keyboard, curb cuts to audiobooks, those came about as a design by or for people with disabilities. I think something I use all the time, closed captions, originally intended for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. But now they not only support language learners, but also people in noisy environments. I keep them on while I'm watching movies. And when we highlight these curb cut effects, as we call them, we can get stakeholders to see accessibility as a strategic advantage, an opportunity to innovate in a way that makes products not just more accessible, but really better for everyone who's going to use them. And so most importantly, when we're engaging stakeholders in the discussion, we can include the voices of those with lived experience of disability. They have to be centered in the conversation to ensure that the accessibility efforts are shaped by those who are going to be most affected by our design decisions. That phrase, nothing for us without us, it becomes especially critical when we're starting to use AI to help drive and design solutions, because those AI systems are going to encode decisions and assumptions and power at scale. So when people with disabilities are excluded or left out of those decisions or those conversations, the resulting systems can absolutely silently harm them, unintentionally, of course, but it reinforces bias and can create new barriers.
Thank you so much for that, Allison. Matt, would you like to go next?
Sure. So as was mentioned, my name's Matt Robinson. I manage a team of accessibility professionals at Pearson Professional Assessments, formerly known as VIEW, and I'm located in the cold but beautiful state of Minnesota. My team includes a quality assurance team that conducts accessibility reviews of products and exam forms and provides guidance to improve the accessibility of the exams that are delivered through Pearson's various professional assessment channels. And our QA team includes staff members with disabilities who are daily assistive technology users. Between my previous career as a school psychologist and my time at Pearson working in qualifications and assessments, I've been in the field of disability and accessibility and assessments for over 25 years. I actually just realized that I was 13 years as a school psych, and this will be my 13th year at Pearson this year. So regarding the question, what has helped us engage stakeholders? I frequently refer to what we do on the accessibility services team as being a smart mirror to other people. So we review products and forms, and then we accurately reflect and report on the accessibility of a product or exam form, and then we provide feedback to the software or content creator. By providing feedback, we educate these groups on the benefits of making their products and exams accessible and how to do it. We also educate them on the drawbacks of not improving a product or form. And while I'm not a lawyer, I work very closely with our legal team, so close, in fact, that we can often anticipate how each other will respond to a given situation. And I frequently share those reflections with other stakeholders. So we help engage stakeholders by educating both the positive sides of making products accessible and the drawbacks of not doing so.
Thank you for that, Matt. And um, it's also very snowy here where I am as well. I think the weather has been impacting a lot of different systems. And rounding us off for this question, Cynthia.
Thank you, Laura. Since we're leading off with our locations, I'm located in Washington, D.C., where we also got a big snowfall, but it's not nearly as much as the rest of the folks on this call. Besides that, the first thing I need to say is that I am not an accessibility expert. I'm very, very glad there are people like Allison and Matt who are experts, and I'm very grateful for the important work they do. I feel like I came into accessibility through a kind of back door. I'm a psychometrician and a consultant. In my consulting work, I do a lot with innovative item types, other innovative forms of assessment, usability. And I've done tons of presenting at conferences on these topics. And for many years, I would have regularly one or two people who would come up from the audience afterwards and say, but what about this? So if I'd shown an example of a new audio item type or video, somebody would ask me, what about candidates with hearing problems or vision problems? And I really appreciate those people who gently and kindly, but continue to remind me of these needs. I think I've been deferring the whole accessibility consideration to experts, to the accommodations staff at the exam programs that were my clients, or other experts. I'd assumed somebody who knew better would be in charge of that. But I realized I was actively encouraging individual staff members of exam programs and the company. Innovative.
Cynthia, I think there we go.
Hello?
Cynthia, I think I lost your audio for a couple seconds. Would you be able to?
I am. Let's see. Behaving yet? Well.
You're back clear for me, Cynthia.
Okay. I don't seem to have a video. Guys, I am so sorry. The phrase is always technology is great when it works. If you can hear me, I'm to proceed, but I'm sorry that doesn't seem like my video is coming back.
Yeah, why don't you try keeping your video off, and might be related to the weather, hard to say. But your audio is back for me, Cynthia.
Okay. Thank you. Well, let's see. I think I was in the middle of saying that I've been deferring the accessibility questions, the considerations to how to solve these things to others. But I was actively trying to encourage programs to add new item types. And while I believed and still believe that many of these new item types offer some solid, important assessment benefits, they can also create an accessibility hurdle where one didn't exist before. And I did not want to be contributing to causing that kind of problem. So I started actively trying to think about these needs. I started trying to come up with lists of what were the issues and how could we address them as we started to develop a new item type. So as I work with a client, generally an assessment program, to bring a new item type to operational form, I started bringing up what are the specific issues, if it's a visual item type, if it's an auditory, if it's involves a new kind of movement, if it's going to be needed to be used by somebody who's using a screen reader, and then what are the important adaptations we can make to the item type itself, to the user interface of it. And so try to bring in the solutions with my client as we consider the design of the new item type. And I am pleased, I am happy to say that we've prevented some problems from ever arising through this.
Thank you, Cynthia. We'll be talking a little bit more about innovative item types later in our questions today. But on the topic of technology, we're going to shift gears a little bit in terms of how new technologies may be allowing testing platforms and accessible delivery to be more inclusive and accessible. So I'm going to call on you, Matt, to comment on this question.
Sure. I have a two-part response to this question. First off, with many testing platforms now being created with browser-based technologies, these rendering engines are increasingly being built with accessibility features baked into the testing platform and available to everyone. For example, it used to be the case that if I wanted to have adjustable font on my exam, I had to request an accommodation to have that feature available. Depending upon the testing entity that I was working with, this accommodation may be available only if I had documentation supporting a disability. But now adjustable font is just built into most browsers. So if I'd like to increase the size of the font that I'm reading, I simply need to press Control plus or to increase the size of the font, or Control minus to decrease the size of the font, or a similar feature on a Mac. All this without needing to request an accommodation. Second, the fact that assistive technologies are increasingly ubiquitous, so they're everywhere, this puts pressure on testing entities to make assistive technologies more readily available. So right now at your computer or wherever you're viewing this panel session, if you have a laptop and a phone within reach of you, you likely have at least 2 forms of screen magnification available within reach of you. Likewise, while I do not have a disability, I prefer to have white text on a black background, as it's easier for my eyes when staring at a screen for long periods of time. When taking a test, I would just expect that feature should be available without the need for an accommodation. So this puts pressure on testing entities to make their testing platforms and exams more accessible.
Thank you very much, Matt. Related to your comment about screen magnification and text contrast, I know for myself, I really appreciate reading in dark mode with black text or black background and white text, especially at night as I'm wanting to go into bed, and having that as an option for testing to reduce contrast or glare, as well as text magnification. But now we're going to flip that question on its head. And, there's all these advantages that technology can bring, but what about some of the areas where test platforms and logistics are still creating barriers to assessment? And Matt, maybe you can comment on this sort of flip side of things.
Sure. So there are some assistive technologies that cannot be put on the same computer without putting the computer in an unrecoverable state where you have to start over. This historically has caused problems in brick and mortar testing centers, as I cannot have all of the assistive technologies available to everyone on the same machine. Therefore, years ago, I was very excited when we began rolling out online exam delivery, because I realized we could begin using the candidates' assistive technology with their individualized settings instead of having an assistive technology with default settings in a shared location. So a drawback of using a candidate's assistive technology is that in some cases, the assistive technology parts of the assistive technology can compromise the construct of the exam. For example, let's say that I want to allow an assistive technology to read text to a candidate. but I am measuring a candidate's knowledge of the term in the exam. It doesn't matter that it's read to them, but I'm measuring their knowledge of words within the exam. If the assistive technology also includes a dictionary or a thesaurus or a feature that simplifies sentences, then I could be compromising what I'm intending to measure. So as with most things in life, there is a benefit and there's a drawback, and we can work through each of those kind of on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you for providing that perspective, Matt. We're going to change gears to sort of the bigger picture. And I'm going to ask Allison to start by commenting on how accessibility by design has changed how you build and deliver assessments.
Yeah, so I mean, really, it boils down to not treating accessibility as a compliance step at the end. And as Matt was talking about delivery platforms, thinking about accessibility from their start building them, it's the same with building and delivering assessments. Thinking about accessibility at the end results in a lot of rework and technical debt. So it's important to embed it into every phase of the development process. So that means from the earliest planning stages, our content development teams are considering really the full diversity of test takers alongside the set of constructs that they're intending to measure. And that especially includes those with disabilities or who have been historically marginalized. So thinking about those the populations that may struggle the most, we can recognize that true inclusive design is not going to be about creating for the average user, but about designing for the full spectrum. When we intentionally design for those at the margins, we're going to be able to create solutions that benefit everybody. In practice, this means that our item writers and reviewers are actively seeking out and looking for potential barriers. So whether that's a cognitive barrier or sensory, linguistic, cultural, within the confines of what they're trying to measure before those ever reach the field. So ACT has adopted universal design principles and regularly consults with diverse users. We have assistive technology users on staff who review, and we ensure that our assessments are flexible and adaptable in that way. They have a universal design and accessibility rubric that they use to create assessment content. And there's a robust internal and external review process to that end that helps to identify any potential barriers in our assessment content. So when we're being proactive that way, that iterative approach can help to reduce the need for remediation and also lead to more innovative and valid assessments. When a content specialist says, I was thinking about using this, but I can see the potential barrier here. What are some other, do you have any ideas on other ways that we could change up this graphic or a different way that we could say this? Those are ways that we're making the assessment better for all users, not just the user who would necessarily be most impacted by that barrier. Ultimately, accessibility by design has kind of shifted the mindset from fixing barriers to kind of preventing them, which results in assessments that are going to be more fair and valid for everyone.
Thank you, Allison. Also reminds me of, retrofitting a home, in sort of to use a metaphor, retrofitting a home is a lot more expensive than building a home with environmental concerns, efficiency in mind. And that kind of planning and thinking about accessibility applies to assessments as well.
Absolutely.
Cynthia, did you want to add to Allison's response?
I'd be delighted. And I love the concept of accessibility by design, of universal design. I think these are wonderful, and I'm delighted when they can be fully executed. In my own work, we don't go that far, but as much as possible, I do try to bring that focus into the design of a new item type or a new assessment format. When I present at conferences and I'm including addressing accessibility design or universal design, I've often tried to focus on getting people started with the easy steps. That's not at all to dismiss the value of the full implementation. I think that's wonderful. I'm also concerned about staff at exam programs who feel like it's such a huge charge that meeting all accessibility needs is such a huge undertaking that they kind of give up before they start. So I've focused my efforts at that end of the continuum of trying to get people started. Because doing something is better than nothing at all. And of course, I hope they'll keep on taking those initial easy steps with other exam programs there and other resources, all the materials that they're developing, the website and informational materials, the tutorials. And then I hope that they start seeing that once that gets incorporated and is routine, that they can take on the next step too. And they'll keep on expanding their accessibility targets until they're developing the truly accessible assessment and communication solutions that Allison's describing.
Thank you, Cynthia. Now, earlier, Cynthia was talking about how innovative item types introduced her to thinking about accessibility. And so just a quick poll from the audience before moving on to the next question what are some innovative item types or alternative item types are you guys familiar with? So there'll be a quick poll that should pop up on your screen, and just to kind of see where we're at in terms of familiarity with these item types that go beyond your single choice, multiple choice format. So we'll leave this up for about 30 seconds, and then we'll see where we're at. I do see a hand in the audience. Samantha, do you have a question for the Q&A portion, or are you having another question?
There's no way to put anything in chat or into Q&A, so I wasn't sure how we were supposed to present anything.
Sorry, could you repeat your question? You mean for the poll?
In general, there's no chat and there's no Q&A. There's no way to communicate to anybody on the panel.
No, we had some limitations due to the technical setup of the webinar in terms of the chat, but we also wanted to avoid dialogue between attendees potentially distracting from the content. But if you do have questions for the panelists, we'll be fielding those at the end with the raise hand feature. So looking at the results, it looks like many of us are familiar with the drag and drop format. I see hotspot analysis, image-based items. A couple are familiar with VR simulation and graphing, equation building. So it looks like many of us in attendance are familiar with at least one or more types of innovative item formats. And so with that in mind, we're going to kick off to our next question, led by Cynthia, about where innovative item types can introduce accessibility hurdles and how these hurdles can be addressed.
Thanks, Laura. And as you can all see from the poll that Laura put up and that you responded to, there's a big range of alternative innovative item types. And one way that I found it useful to think about accessibility is to think about the item types now in terms of the accessibility need. Is it a visual need, auditory, mobility, cognitive, and then to take those criteria as what we're looking for the solution. So if the test taker has a visual limitation or a hearing need, what item types does that apply to? If they have a hearing need, it doesn't apply to the majority of our hotspot items or drag and drop, but it would apply to any use of audio, most uses of video. And then what kind of accommodations might be relevant. And I've made a sort of a very short checklist of 2 or 3 things to keep in mind for each of those sorts of needs. If it's visual, then we can think about if there's a video, say a patient-physician interview. A text transcript of that would be a good solution and could be built in from the beginning. And there's no construct change. So now we're moving to the issue of, does the accommodation impact the test, the underlying construct, what the item writers intended to measure with that, what might be on the test blueprint. And there's no construct change in that case. If it's, say, a heart sound, and the text description of that says that the heart sound has crackles, but what was being tested, what was the intention of testing with that item was whether or not the candidate could identify that the heart sound had crackles, then that does change the construct. And the then SMEs and other professionals at the exam company need to think about how much of an impact that has, and does it matter, and is there an alternative? So that's kind of a big topic of what are the types of innovative items, what are the types of solutions we might look for them, and whether or not the solution is going to impact the construct and what might need to be addressed at that point. So that'll be it for me for now.
Thank you, Cynthia. Matt, I think you might have a couple of comments on this question as well.
Yeah, the good news is here in Cynthia, I was nodding along with everything that Cynthia was saying. When considering innovative item types, I highly recommend that you first clearly define and understand your constructs, and then choose the item type that does not compromise your construct. So often I see it the other way around. Well, we selected this item type. I'm like, well, what are you measuring? And is that a good measure of it? So for example, let's say I have a hotspot item. That's where I have maybe an image and I'm selecting a part of an image to answer a question. If I choose that item type, I am, by nature of the item type, measuring hand-eye coordination. Whether or not I'm intending to measure that, it's a part of what is required to use that item type. I call those hidden constructs within item types, where you're selecting an item type, but on the basis of the particular item type, there are some constructs that are kind of embedded in using that. So some of those hidden constructs within with item types can be addressed through building accessibility features into the item types. Others at this point in time can't currently be addressed. I say currently because, of course, this is constantly evolving. A shameless plug here. If you're going to the ATP conference in March and want to learn more about this, we're going to be talking a lot about this topic at a workshop on Wednesday called Accessibility and Exam Delivery, Creating Valid Exams That Work for All Test Takers. And I'll be presenting this workshop with Liberty Munson from Microsoft. There is a lot with the different item types that you have to think about with those hidden constructs that can actually, if you don't manage for those, it can actually impact the validity of your exam. So it's something to really take into consideration as you're building those exams.
Thank you, Matt. We're going to keep you with the microphone for this next question is, how do you gather the right information about test takers to shape accessibility related decisions?
Yeah, I really liked this question because, as I talked about, you start off by really understanding what your construct is. Another step in that is to understand who will be taking your test and then selecting item types. So what I really recommend is find people in your field that have disabilities and ask them how they perform the constructs that you're trying to measure with your exam. Once you have that information, then you can bake those accommodation features right into your exam. A common illustration that I use is an electrician who was colorblind, and they were taking an exam, but on the exam it had pictures of wires with different colored wires, and all it had was the color of the wires. So in that situation, color was conveying meaning. And so he said, I have a problem. I'm colorblind. And so I just asked him, well, how do you do this in the field? And he showed me a card. And on the card, it had the color red visibly, and then it had the word red by it, and then the color green and the word green by it. He goes, all I do is I put that card up to the wires, and I can tell which wire is which. Working with the content creator, we baked that into the exam because it did not impact the construct. We developed that solution by talking to people in the field who have disabilities. I very highly recommend that.
Thank you, Matt. And rounding off our prepared questions, we're going to hear from each of our panelists again. What's one practice that our audience can adopt this quarter to make accessibility more built in and less of a checkbox for compliance? We're going to start with Allison.
And I'm going to jump back to something both Cynthia and Matt kind of said in different ways. So Cynthia said, sometimes you want to be careful that we're not stopping people in their tracks, stopping innovation in its tracks by having such a big job in front of them of thinking of all the things. But what Matt said is so important, and this would be my one first and foremost thing to do, is involve people with diverse abilities and backgrounds directly in that development and review cycle. So, if you have an idea, put it out there, but put it out there to the edge, put it out there to users who are not going to be your, what we'll call typical users, right? So all the research that Todd Rose did over a decade ago on the myth of average, we know that doesn't even exist. So we need to seek out and really value the feedback from those edge users to create solutions that are going to be robust and adaptable for all. We can do that, but it means we can make things accessible, but we have to be relying on the people with disabilities who are going to be using our products to test them, iterate with them, and take their feedback and not make it as an afterthought. Embedding accessibility reviews, checklists into your standard workflow, making it a shared responsibility across your team, and then use those regular testing sessions with users with a wide range of accessibility needs. Take their insights, that will reveal the barriers that you have, and then go ahead and make changes that you can.
Cynthia?
And I love Allison's answer. I love that focus that both Allison and Matt are putting on speaking with end users. And I hope to get to do more of that in the future. I would start by, depending on the exam, I know for the exam programs I've worked with and the item types they have, and the candidates that the people who've applied to be in that profession, sometimes you have more people with one disability or one need for an accessibility consideration than others. A lot of our exams don't include any auditory materials, so I wouldn't start with auditory solutions. Mobility, visual, cognitive issues, these are more likely to apply. And I would say for most of the programs I work with, visual is the largest one. So at a minimum, start there. Maintain good size, and ideally separate the controls for enlarging font size and enlarging images differently. I have worked with test takers in usability sessions, and they really want those to be separate. Color contrast, both colors for, as Matt says, those who have color blindness, contrast. A lot of the modern design of sort of a dark gray font on a light gray background is much less useful for a majority of people than earlier black on white, or blue on yellow, or whatever it might be, to provide contrast that works. And fortunately, there is a website that AIM, Accessibility in Mind website, has a color and contrast checker, and you can put the actual colors you have with your little, like a little teardropper, eyedropper, pick up the color and put it in there, and it will tell you whether that will work at different sizes and whether bold or not. It's a wonderful, handy resource. Use real text versus an image of a text. I know on our ATP, like the border that Laura has on the screen there, where it says ATP Global, that is going to be an image of a text. So a screen reader would not be able to read that aloud because it would be image, and hopefully there would be alt text, but it wouldn't actually read aloud ATP Global the way it will read aloud the question. So these are things that can absolutely become checklist items, and they're not hard to do, and then they just get built in, which, as I said, is my goal for the starting steps.
And last but certainly not least, Matt.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, what one quick practice could you take away that maybe you could implement right away? What I'd recommend is reviewing your list of accommodations that candidates currently have to apply for, and ask yourself for each of those, like, is this something that is there something that wouldn't impact the construct of my exam if I turned on for everybody? And and Cynthia just talked about color contrast. That's a good example. If you have some accommodations that are kind of behind the accommodation request process, just ask yourself and talk with your test delivery provider. Is this something that I could turn on for everybody without needing to go through the accommodation request process? Because like I said, that's not only going to benefit people with disabilities not having to go through that request process, but it's also going to benefit people without disabilities who like the feature, and they run into that feature everywhere on their computer.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you very much to all of our wonderful panelists for the for their answers to all of our prepared questions. We're going to move on next to the audience QA component, beginning with some questions that were submitted ahead of time to the session, and then we'll open up the floor to the audience to ask some live questions. So the first question that came in from during registration is related to exam integrity and security. So we heard, what are strategies for managing accessibility, equity, and exam integrity or security when testing both remotely and in person? So I'll open up that to any of our panelists who'd like to comment on that question.
I'm happy to jump in to start, and I know others will have some. Well, they're not identical testing conditions, so I think we have to. That's the first thing. We have to really be honest about the fact they're not identical testing conditions, and so we can't expect them to be identical in that regard. But we can define what makes them functionally equivalent across both, right? So when thinking about specifically accessibility, again, building it into workflows, not making it as an afterthought. This could mean that we're going to use AI and automation as a support instead of a substitute for judgment. So if we have AI monitoring some things, we need to explicitly document from the get-go, what does it typically look like for test takers using screen readers, refreshable braille, interpreters, or magnification, dictation, alternative input. We need to know what those things look like, so that we're not going to unintentionally trigger integrity alerts, right? So when AI flags a session for gaze changes or background noise, decisions need to be reviewed by trained humans who understand disability-related behaviors and assistive technology use and accommodation approvals. So thinking just about the accessibility piece, that's what I would say. And I think overall, we need to think about technology in general. So this remote technology as a risk reducer, it's not going to be a guarantee. So automation will increase our coverage and speed, but in terms of validity and fairness, it's going to depend on the human in the loop, that human review. I think, making sure that we can document when there's going to be some trade-offs around security and integrity, and including and it goes both ways. Security being involved in accommodations feasibility discussions, and then the reverse is also true, making sure that accessibility experts are in the conversations with security and integrity reviews.
Thank you, Allison, for that detailed response. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next pre-submitted questions. And then if time permits, Cynthia and Matt, we can revisit that first question, or if you're the one who submitted that question, we can raise that during the interactive component. So the next question that was submitted was, how do we evaluate innovative or alternative item formats, such as item difficulty, from the perspective of accessibility?
Since I'm unmuted, I could jump in. This was similar to what I talked about before, but again, if you start off really understanding what you're measuring, really understanding who your test takers are, then all the other decisions that flow downstream from that, what item types am I going to select, what accommodations do I allow, or what are available, what accessibility features do I need to build in to an innovative item type in order to allow all of my test takers to take it. Those downstream questions become a lot easier, and especially if you're asking those questions with plenty of time. The worst case scenario is when the exam's already out there and now we're asking questions because somebody is requesting an assistive technology or an accommodation request for an exam, and we haven't considered it before. So the earlier that you think about it and kind of systematically approach it is going to help with those types of questions.
Thank you, Matt. Allison, Cynthia, did you want to comment on Matt's response? All right. So then the last pre-submitted question was, how are AI systems impacting your work as an accessibility professional in the testing industry?
I'm happy to jump in here. I can give you some concrete examples of how we've been using AI to advance accessibility at ACT. So, our assessments contain graphics, and graphics need alt text in order to be accessible. And so we have trained some AI software to use our guidelines to draft that initial text. And then our content specialists can go in and review and edit, which frees them up to focus more on the item content and less on the alt text that's going to be behind those images. So that's an example of how AI can be used. We want to make sure that we're able to produce equitable test prep for all users. And so doing that for Braille at scale in an equitable timeline can be a real challenge. And so we're engaging with AI to try to create digital Braille files and printable tactile graphics for test prep users who require Braille. Again, there's going to be a critical human in the loop QC'd by a Braille user to make sure that we're reviewing and editing anything. And then another example, we have AI-supported embedded video ASL translation as a way to produce accessible test content securely. And we can do that effectively and sustainably at scale for users who need ASL accommodations. So that's another reason, but also a human in the loop. We have, users, ASL users who are reviewing our content and providing us feedback and going back and making revisions as needed. That human in the loop is always going to be really important. It just becomes part of kind of that vendor workflow assurance too. It's not just going to be WCAG checks, although those are there too. It's going to be making sure that we have, a valid end-to-end accessibility kind of pipeline.
Thank you, Allison. And, I want to make sure, I know we had some members of our live audience today who had some questions for our panelists. And so I'm going to open up the floor to our audience. If you do have a question for our panelists, please use the raise hand feature and I will call on you. And then before you ask your question, if you have a panelist whose question it's targeted to, then mention that. Or if it's sort of an open question to any of the panelists, that's fine as well. So the floor is open and I'll just keep an eye out on the participants list for raised hands. As we wait for some audience questions to come in, Matt, I know that you had the opportunity to plug your ATP session. Allison, Cynthia, you're welcome to chat about any sessions you might be involved in as well at ATP if you'd like to take this time while people consider their questions.
I'll be co-presenting with Elizabeth Santana a session on usability. Adventures in Usability is the name of it. And then I am presenting on a panel on innovations. I'm sorry that I just got added to that one and I don't remember the name. And then I have one that I'm doing with Pamela Kaliski and Katie Sancho from American Board of Internal Medicine on a new item type, the generated response option item type. We're very excited about that as well.
And no plug for me, but I'm excited to attend and to listen to both your presentations.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. I'm not seeing any raised hands in the chat. So before we send you all on your merry way with a couple of minutes to spare before the top of the hour, I'd like to invite Kelly to say a few words about the ATP Equity Committee sessions coming up.
Hi, thank you. Thank you everyone for attending and to Laura and the panelists for a great conversation on accessibility. So I am Kelly Dagus. I'm the chair of the Equity Committee, and I just wanted to remind everyone about upcoming Innovations Conference in March in New Orleans, and specifically the Equity Committee lunch, where we'll have some conversations about the role of essential skills as it relates to equity. And that is on that Monday, March 2nd at 12:15 during the lunch break in Strand 12. Of course, this information will also be in the program. There are also 16 kind of equity related sessions that will be presented at ATP. And you can find those if you go to the Innovations website. Under like the program menu, there's a divisions highlights, and there's links to a list not only of the equity sessions, but there's some of the other committee sessions as well if you want to, really hone in on those specific areas. And there's really, a lot of sessions not only about accessibility, about inclusion, and just making sure that the assessments we're providing are, fair for everyone. And that's my plug. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If we can all give a virtual round of applause to our panelists, Allison, Cynthia, and Matt. On behalf of the ATP Equity Committee, thank you so much for joining us as panelists, and thank you to our lovely audience for taking an hour out of your day to start the year strong with accessibility. We look forward to seeing you at ATP in the spring.
Thank you.